Now, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is expected in Parliament soon to present the first quarter of 2021 budget for approval. Ahead of that, there are mixed expectations. NDC MP on Parliament's Finance Committee, John Jinapo, does not expect any major policy announcement.
Today is a day that we all expect to hear the minister give indications as to how government will be run for the first quarter of 2021. It is a requirement under the Constitution that we have some votes provided before appropriation. So what I expect him to do is that he should be able to give us enough money for the next government. It may be NDC, it may be MPP, but usually when the funds are reasonably big, it helps the new government run the economy. The military has to be supported, the health sector has to be supported, salaries have to be paid, the ministries have to work. So, and then the new government that comes in needs time to settle, to appoint ministers and all that before a budget can be prepared. So I don't expect any big thing, but what I propose or I think should happen is that the COVID-19 era has taken a lot of toll on Ghanaians, and so the government or the minister may probably increase the amount of money that may be required for running the country over the first quarter. But as to the details, we may have to wait. But the essential things are like the army, they have to keep the peace, the police have to keep the peace, the ministries have to work to ensure government does not ground to a halt, the health sector has to work, the schools, if really January is the time to open most of the schools, then the educational sector will need funding. And of course, Parliament will also sit from 7 January, and they need to be money to run the business of the country. So presumably a bigger figure than we all anticipated because of the COVID, and so that's going to be post-COVID, we can see. Even though COVID is not gone, we still think that the monies that will be voted should be slightly significant.
We've heard figures that, around 27 billion as what most likely the minister will be requesting for the first quarter. Fair figure, high side, low side, you think?
Well, I think it's fair. I would have even thought that maybe a 30 billion, because you see, whatever figure you give will form part of the global budget for 2021. And so if it's 27, it's fair. If it's 30, it's fine. But whatever the projection is, the government's own plan for 2021 would obviously take out whatever amount is appropriated. So 27, I think I've also heard something, a number around that figure.
We're in an election year, and so the finance minister would usually not present the full year budget for 2021. However, beyond December, in January, we ought to incur some expenditure. And under our Constitution, standing orders, and Public Financial Management Act, you need authorization from Parliament in order to spend. So what we are doing is more or less like a holding budget, something that would sustain us for the first 3 months. That's the first quarter of January, February, and March. And whoever emerges victorious or constitutes the next government, the finance minister will be expected to come with a full year budget in March. What I expect is that the finance minister at least would give us some updates of happenings within the fiscal year, at least the first 3 months. That's the 3 quarters rather. You should give us some information, because clearly there are challenges with the economy. If you look at the macro indicators, the debt to GDP, our fiscal space, if you look at our import cover, if you look at most of the indicators, we are challenged. And so it's important that he gives us some update on that. That would also inform us as to how to approve the budget for the next 3 months. That 3 months, the holding period. Basically,
so you don't expect any drastic policy?
No. He is not supposed to bring us major policy interventions or policy decisions backed by budgets, because we're going to be doing interest payment. We're going to service our debt. We're going to pay salaries. We're going to deal with emoluments. We're going to deal with statutory payments. And so Parliament ought to grant that approval for the next 3 months. But in terms of real policy, like capital budgeting issues and all that, we don't expect that to happen. We expect that the next government will then come out with a budget to do that.
We gather that he may be requesting for approval of money to the tune of around 27 billion Ghana cedis for the first quarter. Fair? Would that be a fair projection of?
We're looking at the 2020 budget figures. That will sound like something on the high side. I'm tempted to think that then our interest payments are really ballooning. Because this year alone, when it comes to debt servicing, we are spending about 38 billion with a tax revenue of just 42 billion. It means that when we collect all our tax revenues, over 90% goes into debt.
Let's talk to Joseph Opoku Gakpo now, who joins us live. Joe, when is the minister expected to come to Parliament?
That's still the million-dollar question. We are still waiting. Sitting was supposed to begin around 10 o'clock. Sitting eventually began around 11:53. But the finance minister himself, Ken Ofori-Atta, is not in the chamber as we speak. The House has begun dealing with other businesses, including dealing with a bill having to do with the ambulance service and all, and they've been correcting their votes and proceedings from yesterday. But it's unclear when the minister himself will be in the House for the presentation of the first quarter budget.
Do we know what's delayed sitting?
Not exactly. The indication that those on leadership we ask are giving is that they have a lot of other businesses. In fact, when you look on the order paper which outlines the specific activities that the House is supposed to take care of this morning, it goes beyond the presentation of the budget itself. So the leadership give the impression that they are just dealing with the other businesses. When the time reaches, they will get onto the budget issues. But for now, no one is sure why the finance minister hasn't showed up. But leadership make the point that there isn't a case of a delay and that they are just dealing with other businesses before they get to the budget. And that's when they get there, the finance minister will be available to take care of that.
Now, yesterday, Joseph, you told us that there were only about 11 members of parliament when the House began sitting, and that number rose to only about 30. What are the numbers like this morning in the chamber?
I think today the numbers are looking far more than the House has ever sat ever since they returned from their third meeting, the break that they had for their third meeting just about 3 weeks ago. The House is having the highest number of MPs showing up. Paying attention, it's inching towards 100 in terms of those who are present on the floor as we speak in order to get business done. We gather that on both sides, there's been the conscious effort to encourage MPs to show up because it's the day that the said budget statement is being presented for the first quarter of next year. The expectation is that when sitting is done, the said document will be referred to Parliament Finance Committee, and they will be holding a sitting later today in order to deliberate on this. And before the close of the, they will come back to the House with a report in order to allow for approval of this request that's come to the House.
Joseph,
on the specific,
go ahead.
On the specifics, we've seen on the order paper that the amount that the House will be approving is 27.4 billion Ghana cedis. We gather that a lot of it will be going into a health area because of efforts to build a resilient healthcare system post-COVID-19. That's one of the things that a lot of the budget will be dedicated to. Portions of it are going into regular payment, including debt servicing, payment for health services and all. But one of the other things that we are told it's likely the finance minister will be giving more details on is another economic recovery plan post-COVID that the minister will be laying details of once he presents the budget statement, and portions of that will be contained in the 27.4 billion Ghana cedi that you'll be requesting that the House approves.
Joseph Opoku Gakpo, thank you very much for joining us.